This video is about a process I call shadow branching. It is primarily shading the ends of the branches so that they are forced to grow new growing tips along the bare stems. When I started this process with this ficus, all of the green that you see here did not exist. All that there were leaves at the very tips. Initially I tried snipping off the very end of the growing tip to see if that would promote branching. The tip healed and grew back, which was not helpful. I also tried cutting it back a little further, which I was trying to avoid doing because that leaves a damaging scar. The same thing happened. It just grew back on the very tips. Nothing came out on the branches or the main trunk. I also tried something I saw online that was supposed to promote smaller leaves, which is to just cut off all the existing leaves. I tried that as well. I think it probably did perform that function on the ends of the branches, but again, nothing came out back any farther. So I had the thought that the plant kept thinking that there was something at the end where it could grow, and to thwart that without leaving a scar, I wrapped it in weed cloth. I had to double it over. If I did a single layer, it's a soft cloth, it's kind of like a very fine screen, but enough sun was getting through that it was not effective at covering the branches. So this is basically how the cloth looked on the branches when I first applied it. I did this in conjunction with one of the methods for cutting off all the leaves, so there's just a very small growing tip to deal with. I think in the long run, the cutting off the leaves was counterproductive because all that did was push new leaves farther down the end of the branch. So going forward, if I did this, I would just cover whatever leaves are existing to make the plant want to grow new leaves where the sun was hitting. I had the plant sitting in full sun. Every week or so, I removed the black cloth just to make sure bad things weren't happening, and it got some light during the day. I usually let it sit overnight and then recovered them again in the morning. It took about a month and a half, I think. A month maybe before some growing tips started showing up, and a month and a half before actual leaves started coming out. So I do now have several new branches coming out with leaves on them. I may try this process again next year, earlier in the summer, to see if I can promote more branching along the stems. This particular plant is about 30 years old. I did not intentionally try to grow it as a bonsai tree when I first got it, although I'm kind of leaning in that direction at this point. It had many mishaps in its early life, so it kind of grew in a bonsai-ish like environment without my intent. When I initially set up the covers, I used some plastic twist ties to hold the cloths on. It was not the best, just because it was harder to control what parts you were holding together. So I ended up getting some very small, like toy clothespins online that was a little bit easier to control. They're fairly light. When I was completing this process, I made the decision to keep the ends covered until the new leaves were at least of equal size to the leaves that were already growing in the ends. Also, I was concerned a little about putting the new ends, after uncovering them, into direct sunlight. I was getting ready to do a similar thing with white cloth to kind of break them into greater light, but they were quite green when I uncovered them. Just putting them in a partly shaded area for a couple days, I could put them back in full sun and there were no burn spots or problems in that regard. The cloth that I used is just landscaping cloth. Comes in a big roll, and I ended up using at least double layers to cover the ends. So I would just cut a piece, fold it over, and then just wrap it around the leaves and clothespin it in place. I did look online for some other procedures to make this happen. It wasn't until I had actually completed this that I was able to find that this particular outcome was called back budding. And there are some sites that talk about processes to make the back budding happen, but for the most part it's just cutting off the ends, which did not work for this particular plant. The covers that are on here now are basically just for show. I've actually had these covers off for several weeks. So these are not truly wrapped around as well as they should be. You do need to be careful not to wrap the leaves too tightly so that it doesn't disfigure their new growth. I think I did get a little bit of disfigurement on these because when I first wrapped them they had no leaves, so they did not have a lot of room. They're looking okay.